not so short. It's not very long, but not such a short sikha. And it has a lot of, it's shmak inyonim, but tif inyonim that really, to understand, they're very, dakas dike, chilukim, things like that. But we'll get to it. Okay, so we'll start. This is Chelik Yitzayin, the first sikha of Parsha Shmini. Shengeret fil mol v'en chlukas hasedra. The Rebbe says, I spoke many times when it comes to the division of the sedres. Gans dorim deraisa. There are known to be 53 sedres in the Torah. Really, there's another one, but cheshman chapt, as it says in Zohar, and other places, there are 53 storim. Just want to mention that there's sometimes we call it the parsha, like we say, which parsha is this week? This week's Parsha Shmini. Really, parsha is not that. Parsha is in the sedre itself. Like Seder of Shmini, you have different sections. In the Sefer Torah, you have places where there is a separation in certain places. And those are called separate parshas. In the Chumash, you see the Peis or the Samachs in between. So that's a separate parsha. So really, the word parsha refers not to what we call Seder, like Seder, Nayach, Lech Lecho, but parsha refers to within the Seder itself, there are parshas. But when it talks about the division of the Sedres, of the 53 Sedres of the Torah, so the Rebbe said, I spoke many times, as Agami Yeder Seder is Anyadoh Kama Parshias. In every Seder, you have many Parshias, like I said, in many sections. But the other Parsha is an Inya B'fnei Atzmei. Every Parsha is an Inya for itself. From deswegen, still, from them, Gufa was alle Parsha is Anyan derselbe Seder. From the fact that these different Parshas are all in the same Seder, is a Hayichocha, that's a proof, as Binzei Ein Nekudim Mishutefes. There's one common point, common denominator that connects all the different parshias, even though they're different inyonim, but it connects all the different parshias that are in the same seder, that you must have something in common. And it continues. And since the teichen, the context of everything, you could tell it is brought out through the name that is given in Lashon Kodesh. This is a Lashon from Shara Yichud V'Munah. He's moving from that. We understand that in the Kuda Hatichena, welche is do in all inyonim from their Sedre, that we said there is one Nekuda in all the inyonim in the same Sedre. There's one Nekuda, that one Nekuda is Merumas in the Noma from the Sedre. Since the name gives out the Teichen, so it's hinted in the name of the Sedre. When the Shemus HaSedres, the names of the Sedres are names Al Piteira. Now again, who gave the names of the Sedres and where it started? So in the order 3, the Rebbe says, you look, Leib, look at the Sichas Chelik Hayom 57. There, the Rebbe talks a lot about it, about the names. But whichever way we look at it, the names are accepted by Yidden, and they are names Al Piteira. And the name Al Piteira gives out the Teichum. So it comes out that since different Parshias with different Ninyonim are in the same Sedre, so they have something in common, and that concept that's in common, that Nekuda, is hinted in the name. But now, has been negated taken up in the other parsha, the Zunder parsha, even though the specific teichen of every separate parsha is the chilik zwischen der erste and the letzte parsha von ein Sedre. Größer wie der chilik zwischen der erste parsha von a Sedre and the letzte parsha von der Sedre shel von Neo. We know that the beginning of a parsha has a connection to the end of the previous parsha. And the Rebbe says, why? Yibal the parsha is eine smichas eine zum zweiten. Since the parshas are one next to each other, even though one is in a previous Seder and this one's another Seder, but they're still close to each other. To darshan, the connection between two things which are next to each other is a derech in learning Torah. So they are connected. So we have two types of connections. We have a connection of one parsha, one beginning of one Seder to the end of the previous Seder. That's a connection. Here we're talking about a different connection, the connection of all the parshias within one Sedre. So the Rebbe says, when you talk about the specific teichen of the parsha, so the difference between the first and the last parsha of one Sedre, which is different, they're talking about different inyonim, is a greater difference than the end of the parsha with the beginning of the next parsha. Be'esas zwischen der erste parsha und der letzte parsha in ein Sedre, eine Veran Kama parsha Zamafsikis, because we see that between the end of one parsha, a Sedre, and the beginning of another Sedre, there is nothing in between. So the fact that they're close together shows there's a connection. While when we're talking about the connection between all the different parshas within one Sedre, there it seems like it's a less connection. Because from the beginning of the Seder to the end of the Seder, the first parsha of the Seder and the last parsha of the Seder, there's a lot of things in between. That shows that they're not so connected. Nevertheless, he's over in Nakuda Mishatefes Hanal, but when we're talking about this Nakuda that all the parshas in one Seder have, seine Dafke by the parshas, afilu nitzmuch zayin in the Zelba Seder. That applies only to the different parshas in the same Seder. In other words, from one angle, in the specific things, the end of one parsha with the beginning of the next parsha is connected more than all the parshas within one Seder. But on the other hand, there's another Nakuda in which all the parshas of one Seder are connected and they're all one union, even though there is a separation between the beginning and the end and the different parshas. There's a greater Nakuda Mishatef, a greater common denominator than the connection of the beginning of the Seder with the end of the previous Seder. From them is moving from that we understand concerning our Seder, which is Shmini. As trotzdem was mitzad echad hat die Ascholos HaSeder vahi b'yem HaShmini asach mer shaychet zum Siyum HaSeder shel Lefaneo wie zu der Parsha Zeis HaChayo. One of the parshas in this week's Seder is Zeis HaChayo, where the Torah goes into the details of which animals are kosher, which animals are not kosher, which this is by Siyum from Seder Shmini. That's by the end of Shmini. But according to what the Rebbe said before, where's the connection more? So the connection between Vahi Bayem Hashmini, which is the beginning of the Seder of this week, has a very strong connection to the end of the previous Parsha. More than the connection between Parsha, beginning of Shmini, to the end of Shmini, which talks about the kosher animals. We see very simple pshat and posik that the beginning of Shmini is very closely connected to the end of Tzav. The beginning of the Parsha, when it speaks about the 8th day of Miluim, you know, when they put up the Mishkan, there were 7 days before, which are called Shiva Simei Miluim, 7 days of dedication, of preparing the Mishkan. They did different Avedas and Kabbalahs, etc. That was spoken about in the end of Parshat Tzav. The beginning of Parsha Shmini talks about the 8th day of Miluim. So there's a very strong connection. The end of Parshat Tzav talks about the 7 days of Miluim, and then it goes into directly, right after that, into the 8th day of Miluim, a very strong connection. But Vahi Bayem Hashmini, with Zeis HaChaya, with the text which Chaya is animal, it's kosher, which is not animal, and which animal is not kosher, doesn't seem to be any connection. On the other hand, but on the other hand, since every Sedre, with all the Parshas in it, have one Nakuda, was in is the Uizgetelt von alle andere Sedres, and with that Nakuda, it's different than any other Sedre. Is verstandig, we understand that the Parshias, Vahi Bayem Hashmini, und Zeis HaChaya, haben beide ein Teichen meyuchet, was is nito in Parshas Kachesaren. There's something specific that is connects the beginning of Shmini with the end of Shmini, which talks about the Chayas. More than the connection of the end of Tzav, which talks about the Shiva Simei Miluim, and the beginning of Shmini. Und der Doseke Teichen wird herausgebracht in Shem HaSeder Shmini. And this Nekude, this Teichen, of all the Protim in the Parsha Shmini, from the beginning to the end, from Vahi Bayem Hashmini, the 8th day of the Miluim in the Mishkan, and the end talks about the kosher animals, there must be some connection there. And it's all, as we said before, hinted in the name, that the word Shmini gives out that Nekuda and that connection. Give me 1 second, I'll make air conditioning. And obviously the question is, what is it, this Nakuda, which is hinted in the word Shmini, that binds together the beginning of Parsha Shmini and the end? Von dem, was in dem Namen von der Seder ist nicht angedeiht, als dort redt sich wegen Shmini leMiluim. In the name, it doesn't say anything that it's the 8th day of Miluim. It is. When it says Vahi Bayem Hashmini, means the 8th day of Miluim. But the name doesn't say the word Miluim. Und afilu nit as redt sich wegen einer Nacht und Tag bechlal. It doesn't even, in the name, it doesn't say it's an 8th day. From the Seder heißt nicht Yem Shmini or the Shmini Stam, nor Shmini Stam. It doesn't, it's not Yem Shmini. So we don't know that the name doesn't say Not that we don't know, we do know, but the name itself doesn't express the fact that it's the 8th day of Miluyim, but B'chal it's an 8th day. The name is Shmini, 8. His movements, and that we understand, as though is Negei, the close the Krinya for Shmini. Anachter, that the Nakuda that's here is not the 8th day of Miluyim, or the 8th day, the concept of 8. Und nicht der Protest the Krinya for Miluyim oder Yomim in welchen is derachter. And not Negei that it's what at the 8th of what? The 8th of Miluyim, the 8th day. The Nakuda that's here is in the name, and the name is Shmini. There's a concept of Shmini of 8, and that is in the Nakuda of the Sedre, which combined connects the beginning to the end. And based on what we said before, in the Mchilik zwischen the Shaykhs from Siyam HaSeder Shel Fanel, when the Shaykhs are under Pasha and the Sedre Gufu, as we said before, that there is a connection between the beginning of Shmini to the end of the previous Pasha. And then there's the connection of all the things in the same Sedre. So the way we said before that the end of the previous Sedre to the beginning of the next Sedre is one connection, but it doesn't come to the connection of all the Inyonim in the same Sedre. It comes out as Parshas Kachas Aaron from the Friedrich Sedre, that the Parsha where it says take Aaron and prepare him and make the Shivas Mi'amaluyim is Benegeya, the Kuda Amshetefes is concerning the Nakuda of Shmini, Blaze Hagdomet to Shmini. That's not called Shmini. There is a connection. That is 7 days of Miluyim. This is the 8th day. So they're connected. But Lagabe, the concept of Shmini, that is not a Parsha in the Sedre of Shmini. So the connection is different. So in everything in the Sedre of Shmini, you have one Nakud of Shmini. And the end of the previous Parsha, which is also connected, but there the connection is only as an introduction. It's only an introduction to Shmini. Or Benit Aziz, Atel from Shmini, it's not part of Shmini. But Dugma Vidos is Bepashtes, as it is in a simple pshat. The 7 days of Miluyim was an introduction to the 8th day. The main thing, as we look in Chumash, we learn in Chumash, the 8th day was the day that the Shechina came down. That's the beginning of Eiv Shmini. That's when the Mishkan really became the real Mishkan for permanent, not temporary. The 7 days was an introduction. So just like the Gashmi is the 7 days, which is talks about in the end of Parshat Tzav, was an introduction to the 8th day of Parshat Shmini. So in Inyan, what he's going to explain in the Sikha is also, there's a concept of Shmini, but that starts from the beginning of Shmini, and what the connection to the end of the previous Sedre, which is Shivas Miyam Elohim, is only an introduction. But when he talks later at the end, say Sachaya, this is the animal that you could eat, etc., etc., that is connected to Shmini. That's part of Shmini because it's part of the Sedre of Shmini. And the question is, what is the Shmini that tells us and to explain all this? You understand this by first introducing this. When we talk about the 8, the concept of the number 8, not just in the numbers, some numbers, but in Torah, especially in Chassidus and Kabbalah, what is the meaning of the number 8? There are two extremes. On one hand, the number 8 shows something that is completely removed from the ones before, completely higher. The Loshen Muvdal. Muvdal Be'erech. Muvdal Be'erech is a Loshen Chassidus. Some people make a mistake and think the word Muvdal Be'erech means it's separated, but it's Be'erech. It's not really completely separated. The word is the opposite. In the Mamorim, the Rebbe Rashabi uses that Loshen. Muvdal Be'erech means it's separated from any Erech. There is no Erech, which means it's a number that is not shot, it's a Hemshech and 1, like 2, Lagaba 1, 5, Lagaba 4. It's a Hemshech. It's higher, it's more, but it's a Hemshech. 8 is completely separated from the numbers before, and that's what it says in Chassidus. The Klayoker in Parsha Shmini says, as all inyonim from the Bria Zayin Mispar Zayin, all the inyonim of the creation is number 7. The Mispar Shmini is Meyuchad Elad Yisbarach. The number 8 is connected to the Eibishter himself. He says that why special of the Yom HaShmini, because Shmini is such a number. And he explains that Lagabe, the creation was 7 days, including Shabbos. Shabbos is the holiest day of creation, but it's still part of creation. Like it says that even on Shabbos, the Eibishter finished the creation, because till Shabbos there was something missing, Menucha, and Var Shabbos Ba Menucha. So Shabbos is still part of the creation, even though Shabbos is Kodesh and the other days are Chayil. And nevertheless, Shmini is even higher than that. It's Miyuchad Elad Yisbarach. And we see that everything is in the Shmini. There are 7 in heaven, 7 days to the week, 7 weeks to Sfira, 7 weeks of Sfira. A lot of things that there are number 7 we find. 7 heaven with that. But the number 8 is beyond creation. That's connected to the Eibishter. Und der Pirish davon ist, what does it mean that the number 8 is completely separated? The number 7 is not only thing connected to things of the creation. So we say the creation is 7. Number 7 shows on the creation. It's called a cycle, a completion. So normally we would think without Chassidus that that's what it means. That's what the Koyaka means. This is creation. It has beyond creation. That's the creator. So the Rebbe says the Pshat is not like that. It says in different Mamorim Chassidus that it's not only that the 7 includes only the creation. Nor in them that it also goes on the Keich of Davish, the godly light which is in the Bria, because in order to have the creation, you have to have godly light. So it's not only that 7 represents the creation per se, it represents the creation, including the Eireliki, the godly light that's in the creation. On Shmini is Merames of the Eirwas is Hechef and Nislapshis and Welt. That represents the light of Hashem. That's beyond the being Nislapish put into the world. That's called Chinas Eir Shalamayel Mishtalshil. It's called Hayr Mishtalshil. So 7 doesn't only refer to creation, but it refers to the Eir Ein Sof, which is Shaykhis to Ishtalshalis. Creation is Ishtalshalis. The Ein Sof that Shaykhis to Ishtalshalis, that's still under number 7. 8 is the Ein Sof, which is Hayr Ishtalshalis. So that's on one hand. So 8 is completely removed because Hayr Ishtalshalis compared to Ishtalshalis is Be'ein Arech. Aber Leidach on the other hand, weiß der Teich from Wort Shmini Gufe, Achter. On the other hand, the word itself, Shmini, which means the 8th, shows that it's not something for itself. It's shaykh and it comes in continuation to the 7. That's a Taich 8. 8 means it comes after the 7. And in the number 8, you see that there are 7 before, so it does show shaykh. See, sometimes we make the 8 separate. Like Lamoshal says in Svarim, the Posik, Oz Yoshir, Oz, Aleph, Zayin. So Svarim say that Aleph is on top of the Zayin. Zayin is 7, and that shows in creation. The Aleph is the Eibush on top. So there we don't say 8. Obviously, if you say 7 and 1 equals 8, but we don't use the word 8. But Bichlal, when we say Shmini, or like I hear Bayim Shmini, we use the word 8. So 8 means it comes after 7. That means it's connected to before, it's a continuation. So on one hand, the word 8, the number 8 is completely beyond Ishtalshalis. On the other hand, it's connected to the 7, which is part of Ishtalshalis. Seems like a contradiction. So he says, no, that's the main concept of 8. In them, the completion, the perfection of revelation of a Lakus is in the number 8. Is these two things together? The Tachlis HaKavani is, the main Kavani is, as Eich der Eir, was is Hechef und Ishtalshalis, shall nimshech werden begili in Welt. Welt only has a Gilu Eir of Ishtalshalis. The Kavani is that the Eir that's higher in Ishtalshalis should come and reveal itself in the Welt in Ishtalshalis. Und das ist Merumis in Wort Shmini. That hinted in the name 8. As Eich das, was is moved und Hecher von der Brie. 8, as we said, the first thing is it's completely removed from the creation. And even this, that's completely removed from creation, which is from Prina Shiva. Shiva, 7, is the creation, Kanal B'Kol Yaakov, like a brought in the Yaakov. So even that light, which is higher than creation, soll sein in an Eifen from Shmini, was is Shayach zu Prina Zayin, the Yonah Bria, should be Shmini as an 8. When 8 means it's connected to the one before. So to bring down that high level of Eir Ein Sof Shalamayla, higher than Ishtalshalis, into Ishtalshalis, into Welt, that's the word Shmini. That's why it has these two extremes. Because it's Be'etzem and Eir higher than Ishtalshalis, but we want to show that the Tachlis is that when that comes into Ishtalshalis, into Welt, which will be Nizgala Losid Love, as we'll learn in the Sikha, so that's what 8 represents. Und das ist der Bier, what the Kinder Shalamis HaMashiach was sein for Shmin and Ninim. That's what the chart that it says in Gemara, that the Kinder, the harp. So the harp, normally a harp has 7 strings. The harp of the time of Mashiach is going to have 8 strings. What's the Cheshbon 8? Pshat is like this. The Chidish was Vatzichufta Mesa Mashiach, the specialty of the time of Mashiach, where it says, V'nikol Kvei Davai V'ro Kol Bosa, that the glory of Hashem will be revealed. All flesh will see Hashem. Means, Astrotz them was Kvei Davai is Bein Arei Checher from the Bria. When we speak about Kvei Havaya, the godliness is completely higher than the creation. But what it says is that level of Kveit Havaya, which is higher than the Shtalshalis, that the Dan Zayin Begilu in Eifem Furo Kol Bosa, it'll be revealed that the Bosa, the physical flesh, will see it. In Ariya Mukhshis from Bosa Agashmi, you'll actually physically see it. Your physical flesh will see it. These are the Gilui Pchinas Kvei Davaya, but Zayin nicht b'derech Chidush, no b'derech Pshitas Nilam Agashmi. That this thing, that the Kvei Davaya will be Nizgala, and the Chidush, the specialty that he's explaining here, it won't be Nizgala as a Chidush, something new on top of the creation, beyond creation and the creation. It's going to be revealed in a way that this is really what the creation is. That's what he says. It'll be b'derech pshitas. It'll be simple. And he explains. That means like this. This is the physical flesh will see the glory of Hashem. But the zayin mitzad itchunas and teva from zayin dembels gashmis v'kemetzias. It's going to become that this will be the nature of the world, the nature of the world. And the Gashmi is to see the revelation of Hashem. The way the nature of the Gashmi is going to be then. But demelt is der emes eifens from derech pshitas. Then that's the pshat that in Welt, it's very simple. It's poshet that sees a lakus. And he's going to explain. The shas der boss is that kveidavai norm mitzadem was kveidavai is blikvul. Und der Fahr kenner arabkum nech lamat v'mata. Bis zu gesehen werden echt durch Bosser Hagashmi. If you would say that the Bosser Hagashmi sees a lakus, Losidovi will see a lakus, because the Kveid Havaya is so strong, it's unlimited, infinite, and it could come down Lamata that even the Bosser Hagashmi could see it. In other words, it's going to see it not because that's its nature, its characteristic. It's going to see it because the air is so strong that it comes into him. But it doesn't come because that's the characteristic of the flesh. If that would be the pshat, then is the Gilui Lakus in Welt. Then when you say there will be Gilui Lakus in the world, even if the Welt sees it, Poshet physically sees it, it's still not even for Chidush. It's something new. It's an addition to the world. In other words, the world is not like that. But the Eibusher is going to come and like push the Lakus into the world, that the world will see it, and will see it physically. But that's called, it's a Chidush. That's not what the world really is. Because when it sees the covenant of Hashem, that's not the nature. The real pshat when we say that Losid Love, the Vel, the Bosser Agashmi, will see a Lakus in a even Poshut, which means simple, this is its nature, is also the Bosser Vetzen Kvedavaya, but the Zayin Misaditchunis and Teva from the Bosser Gufer. That the fact is going to see the light of Hashem, the covenant of Hashem, because that will be the nature. This is the nature of the world. In themselves, just like it's nature of the physical eye to see physical things, that's not a chidush. That's what the teva is. But dos is inside the teva utchune from the eine bosser gufer. The eye see it. That's normal. La'osid love, it'll be the teva of the vel to see a lukus. Not the pshat. The teva will remain like not to see. But the Eibusher will be megala. That's called chidush. The uftu is that it's going to become the nature of the world. Well, those are the shaykhs when you make some Mashiach on Mispa Shmini. That's the connection. At the time of Mashiach, with the number 8, we said that the harp of Mashiach will be 8 strings. This idea that will be the revelation of the covenant of Hashem, and the bossa, the physical flesh, will see it. That's going to be in the time of Mashiach. That expresses the 2 extremes which you find in the word Shmini in the concept of 8. How? The Kvei Davai is Hecher removed better from the Bria, was is the Mispazayan. That Kvei Davai that will be revealed, Be'emes, Be'etzem, it's completely removed from the 7, which is Shtalshel, the Bria. And nevertheless, this Kvei Davai will be revealed in the world in such a way that the fact that the world will see that Gilui, that'll be the nature of the world. Der achter wird sein zusammen mit der 7. It's the 8th one, it'll be together. There's a second part of the other side that the 8 means it's connected to the 7. Yes, it'll become part of the 7. It'll remain 8, but it'll still be part of the 7. That this concept will be the 7, which represents the Bria, and the 8, which is Stalshelis, the nature will become the nature of seeing the Lukus. Aber wir verstehen, we have to understand, das was the Welt is it's naiv, was in ihr setzt sich nicht keine Lukus. The fact that the world is now in such a way that you do not see a lakus. You can't see a lakus in the world. I feel needed argument in lakus was in Berach. We don't see in the world not even that level of a lakus, which is ishtalshelis, which is close, not removed so much from the bria. It's part of the bria, and still we don't see it. Why is it like that? It's not like an additional thing to the world. That the Eibusher made a world, And in addition to that, he put something into the world that they shouldn't see Elokus. That's not the pshat. No, the Farbe die Welt ist erschaffen geworden Nazaifen. The world was created. That's the creation of the world, that it should not see Elokus. That means that the nature of the world is where it covers up on Elokus. And the Balda, the hell of the Hester, was in Welt is inside Etzem, since the concealment of Elokus that's in the world come because of its own Mitzias, its own being, is a type of being, that the nature of that being, of the Welt, is not to see Elokus, to conceal. Was my high time about that's why it's called the Elam. But the name of we know the name of everything I said before brings out what it is. So the name of the world is Elam. What is from Loshen Hela, which is concealment, because that's what the nature of the world is. The nature of the world is concealed. So how can we say that Losid Love, this inyan of the world, seeing Elokus, will be part of the nature of the world? The Baldados is Hepech from Geder Tchunas HaBosser, which is the Elam. This is the opposite of the nature of the characteristics of the world, of the flesh. So how did we say before that Losid Love, that'll be the nature? It's the opposite. It can't be the nature. The nature of the world, the way it was created by the Eibush, is not to see Elokus, not to reveal Elokus, but to conceal. How do we say it'll see Elokus? The Rebbe answers it like this. So the Alter Rebbe, says in Tanya, he says like this, that the Gilui, the revelation of the Ein Sof, which is going to be in this world in time of Mashiach and Chiyas HaMeisim, is told by my saying of Abedisayna, because Ma Meshach HaGolus depends on our Aveda and our actions during all the time of Golus. That's what Alter Rebbe says. Uluchure, a strange thing. What is that the dear calls Ma Meshach HaGolus Davke? Why does he say that the revelation of godliness and Mashiach will come depends on our Aveda in Golus? Das was durch my saying of Abedisayna tut man uf and Gile Ein Sof Baruch Hu Be'elam Haza Gashmi, this that our behavior, our Maisim, our Aveda will bring the Gilui of Ein Sof in this world. He says in that pagan time, as Basioso, in doing Shalamit, when we do the mitzvah, we bring down the Gilui, revelation of Ein Sof from up there down here, to be dressed in and put into the physicality of this world. So it depends on mitzvahs. Is mitvos is verbunden dafkim is ma meshach hagolos. Why is it connected to golos? Should have said that our aveda that we do in this world, yes, the word elam hazah would fit here. But why does he mention during golos? It's not dafka during golos. So eine for the biurim b'derech hefshem is that one of the biurim says maybe. The Rebbe says maybe. We know it's for sure. He says like this. Interesting shot. The gay as the giluf yimeis hamashiach with chiyas hamesim. So zayin nirgish mitzateva elam gufik and alsif hey. This that we said before, that the Gilui of Yemei Mashiach and Chiyas HaMeisim should be felt mitzad the nature of the world itself. Not that it should be an additional thing into the world, pushed into the world, but it's going to be that the nature itself will become a nature of seeing Elokus. He says, Dafke ben Yamshocha Elokus shal dei mitzvahs, but Yamshocha kumpli the Gilui losid lovi is nit v'yatzugi geben azachim welt. This concept could only be when you're Mamshech Elokus in Welt, not as a entity which is an addition to the world. That's and really, as we said before, this the mitzvahs bring the Gilui Elokus. Okay, we don't see it now. It says the Amshoch is going to come the Gilui Losid Love. But the only time it could make that the nature of the world to be to see Elokus is when you bring down Elokus into the world in a way that this is part of the nature of the world. We don't know why yet, but that we say. Das heißt, the mitzvahs tun uf nor as in Welt dazu kommen an Eloki. When he says in Tanya that every time we do a mitzvah, we bring a Gilui Eloki, yes, the mitzvahs cause that there will come a new Eir Eloki down. Aber die Welt gufe bleibt wie sie ist gewähnt frei mit Tzaddik Sabbath. The world remains as it was before, Elam Eloshen Helam. It was created to conceal another kus. And even when we say we bring down through a mitzvah Gilui Eir and Maila, so the Gilui Eir comes down, but even if it becomes revealed, the way it's for mitzvahs, it doesn't become the nature of the world. It's mitzvahs bring down the Gilui Eir into the world, like you bring a light into something else. So, but when can we cause that the world's nature becomes that there is Gilui Lukus, whereas the Amshocha durch the mitzvahs soll sein as even as he macht über die Gashmi Selmaze. The mitzvahs is not enough for that. It has to be in such a form that it'll transform the Gashmis of the world, that the Gashmis of the world will become such an entity that itself will see a Lukus. Und der Fahr is the Gilui di Mesa Mashiach Tolov Ma'aseinu Avitzenu Kol Meshach Zman HaGolus. And that's why he says that really what the Gilui of Losid Lovi depends on doing it during Golus. Weil der Inyan was is do in mitzvahs, so übermachen der Welt Gufe is as beike durch die mitzvahs, was mit keinem von Golus. Because this concept, like when we do mitzvahs and bring down Gilui Lukus, it should be in such a way that it transforms the nature of the Gashmi, that the nature of the Gashmi becomes Gilui Lukus. That only comes through time of Golus. Now, he didn't explain it yet. He's just given like an introduction. The Kasha was, the nature of the world is not to see Lukus. So how could we say that Losid Lovi, what will happen is, there will be Gilui Lukus in the world, mitzad its nature. So he says, I'll tell you why. Al Rebbe says that Taka, mitzvahs itself don't do it. Bring a lakus, but it's not the nature of the world. The fact that Singolas, that makes it become the nature. How? Okay, we learn back there. So he explains like this. The time was Maisa mitzvahs b'cholos tu nu pazam shocher. Was macht mit dem Husfeld. We can say like this. Generally speaking, every mitzvah that we do, in any time, it does have a kayach to transform the gashmis of the world. That's the truth. But he's going to try to explain that's true generally speaking, but in detail, it only happens in time of Golus. So generally, if you bring in a lakus, it does have an effect on the gash, and it transforms the nature. Why? Because the purpose of the creation is because of the Torah, because of the Eden. As Eden durch Torah mitzvahs, the whole purpose why the world was created, that Eden through Torah and mitzvahs should transform, should bring Gilui Lakus into the world. Kumtois. It comes out as a Gilui Lakus was nimshich in Welt durch Yisrael und Torah is nicht kein Inyan was kommt als Dovaneisam zu ihm. So if that's the whole purpose of the creation, so then when we bring a Lakus into the world, it's not something that's in addition to the creation. It's not an additional thing, as we're explaining now. Since this idea that we have to bring a Lakus into the world is the purpose of creation. Leib created the world for Torah mitzvahs, for Yidden to do Torah mitzvahs, for Yidden to bring a Lakus into the world. So this is the original kavanah of the Eibishter. Heißt es doch, als der Elam Gufe b'pnimiyus montas, soll sich durchführen sein Tachlis. So obviously, the world, as if he's using an expression, as if the world itself is asking that bring a Lakus in the world, because that's really what I'm here for. The Gilui Lakus in M, durch Torah mitzvahs nidin, is asking, the world wants to come to its goal. The goal is to bring a Lakus in the world. The Mela, when you do a mitzvah, you're revealing the goal of the world, which is really the purpose of the creation. That's the goal. The Mela, that's obviously the nature of the world. So it seems like we could have answered the question before. How do we say the nature of the world to see a Lakus when the nature is the opposite? So now he answered. When we do Torah mitzvahs, we're bringing the Gilui, we're revealing the Tachlis, the real purpose of the creation. So if that's the purpose of creation, means this is the essence of the creation. So this is Be'emes, the nature of the creation. So the Rebbe says, this itself will not be enough. When we valda together from the Elam is for Loshen Helam now. Since together of the world is Helam, is concealment. As mitzad habriye is ihr etzem mitzias azah, was in ihr is nicht nirgische Tachlis, was darf in ihr durchgeführt werden. The way David created the world, he made it in such a way that in the world should not be felt its purpose. David made it should be behelam. So David made it the mitzias of the world is a world, even though the tachlis is, the purpose is to bring a lakus, but David made that the world should be that it should not feel that tachlis. The world should not reveal it. Nor adarabbe, mitzad b'riyosa is in yona helam. As far as the creation is concerned, its inyan is a concealment. Kum tochuis, it comes out as the negeya to their mitzias, und inyan von elam gufe is the amshochas alakusha adei mitzvahs v'yatzugi ebenazach. Therefore, even though this is the purpose, but the purpose itself is not revealed. So when we say that there is through mitzvahs you bring a Gilui Lakus in the world, and the nature of the world is to be a concealment of its purpose, so it comes out that really this doesn't become the nature of the world. The nature of the world remains Helam. This is its tachlis, is Gilui Lakus, but the Eibishter made the world that should be behelam. The tachlis shouldn't be seen. So sof, even though the mitzvahs will bring Gilui Lakus, but this is not really the nature of the world. The nature of the world, it's tachlis of the world, but not the nature to have Gilui Lakus. So the question is, how do we do it? So how do we make that the nature of the world should be a nature of revelation of a Lakus? Now, die Scheile wird beantwortet mit dem, was man sagt, dass das, was die Gilui Lakus tut sich durch Meiser, aber das Seinu is as Beike calls my Mesh Chagolos Kedel Kamen. To answer that, that's what the Alter Rebbe says, that the real way we accomplish it is through Torah mitzvahs during Golus. And then we take accomplish this idea of making the Gili Lakus as a nature, that this is mitzad the nature and the characteristics of the creation itself, as the Rebbe will explain. So the explainer, like I said, it's not a simple thing. It's a tifin yonim. It's many places. Golos is made a keich mesiras nefesh maybe that in time of Golos, the power, the keich of mesiras nefesh, of self-sacrifice, giving up your life for the Eibishter, is stronger than the time of the Beis Hamikdash. The fact that during Golos there's a real concealment on godliness, more than just Welt itself. Welt itself is a concealment. Golos, it's even worse. Being that it's a great concealment, that brings out that the Yid has the Keich Mesiras Nefesh. And we know that during Golos, Yidin will have Mesiras Nefesh. Wie kommt es als Helem soll ausrufen Gilut Mesiras Nefesh? How could it be that the world is Helem and Golos is even a greater Helem? Concealment of godliness. How is that the concealment should bring out the revelation of godliness? Mesiras Nefesh is the revelation of godliness. How does that work? Helem and Gilut are Nochoftem. Revelation and concealment and revelation are opposites. Even though this is a natural thing over there, Moshel Gashmi of them, and there's a physical, simple Moshel, a simple parable to this Inyan, that in Golos there is a Keich HaMesiras Nefesh, is a Moshel. As in the Me'ekiv Sheberegel is do the Shlitas HaRotzim for Nefesh, Mervi dos is in Reish. Says in Chassidus this Moshel, that when it comes to put yourself in hot water, which is very hard to do, so the foot is easier to put into hot water than the head. Why? In the head there is more nefesh, more life. If there's more life, you can't do it. But in the foot, in the sole, the heel of the foot, there's less gilui of nefesh. Therefore, you can put it in. So we see here also as a simple moshel that where there's less gilui, it could listen to. There's more helam. There's in one way more gilui. You could the foot will listen to the rotzen of what the person wants, which means there's more gilui of the rotzen of the person more than in the place where there is more gilui. So l'chura we have a moshel for it. Davon das Gufa verstehen. Good. So we see the Gashmis like that, but we have to understand it. Why did the Eibishter make the nature of the creation like that? So we have a moshel from creation. And since it's in creation, it's also in the union of Mesiras Nefesh. But why did the Eibishter make it like that? Is the Asborim, the explanation is like this. But der soll sich durchführen, die Kavana Sabri von dir ist Borra B'Tachtenim. Die Welt Gufa soll werden Adira für den Meibischen Echt Mitzad Teva. In order for the purpose of creation, which is to make a dwelling place for Hashem in the low world, which means, as we said before, that the world on its own, the nature of the world should be a nature which is a place for Gili Lakus, for Adira for the Eibishter. But the Eibishter, in order for that to happen, the Eibishter Hashem the Welt Nazaif, and the Eibishter created the world in such a way as in ihr soll sich abspliegen die Kavana in Tachlis. That, as we said before, it in the creation is a creation itself, the Bria itself is a concealment on its purpose. But on the other hand, the Eibishter wanted that there should be a reflection of the Kavana and Tachlis of the creation, which is to have Gilui Lakus. When the Yes as the Kavana was die Welt beschaffen geworden an Neven von Hell und Hester. As der Fun la Ruskommen Hecher Gilui. Now we said before the world was created, there should be a Hell of a Hester. But the Eibishter wanted this Hell of a Hester. In the Hell of a Hester Gufa, he wanted it should bring to Gilui. He said before, the Hell of a Hester is the purpose is so it should be the greater Gilui of Dir B'Tachtenim. Because it's Yisra Neim and Acheshech. When light comes of darkness, it's a stronger light. So there is a concealment. And the lower, the greater the concealment is, the purpose is that from that low concealment, you should make Gilui. That is the purpose, not the purpose of creation only, as we said before. The purpose of the concealment. That's the whole Kiddush of this word. Before we said the purpose of creation is it should be Gilui Lakus. But he said, we said that's the nature of the world. So he said, no, that's the purpose. But the Eibishter created the world, that the purpose should be Behelam. But now he's saying the Eibishter wanted that there should be a reflection in the low concealment, should be a reflection of its purpose. So its purpose is not hidden. The Mesiras Nefesh comes out the Gilui in the great Helam. So the Eibishter wanted in the Helam there should be a level of this Gilui. The Father is the Welt eingestellt geworden bei Eifenka said that's what the Eibishter made in such a way. Adafke der Helam za Rusrufen seiner Kehle zu Hecher Neir. The Eibishter made that when should the higher air, which is Mesiras Nefesh, which is the high air of the Lakus that you give up your life for the Eibishter made that should come from the Helam. Because he wanted that in the Helam should be felt. It should be a reflection of the tachlis. So it's not like we said before that the helam is a helam on the tachlis. In the tachlis, there is a reflection. In the helam, I mean, there is a reflection of the tachlis. You have to really think about it to understand it. Therefore, because in the world, which is Elam for Loshen Helam, before there's a revelation of the purpose. Spiegelt sich ob die Kavane von Helam Elam Gufe, is bichdei as al nimshach werden in him, a taste as he is in Nedoch Kima Mitzvahs. The Eibishter made it so that in the Helam, before the Gilui, when there is the Helam, the real Helam, when there is a Helam of a Lakus complete in Golas, the Eibishter wanted that in that Helam there should be a reflection of the Gilui. That's why he made that from that Helam should come the Kirch HaMesiras Nefesh. The Rebbe is the Gilui Lakus Be'elam durch Kiyam HaMitzvahs, verbunden mit the Metzias and Welt Gufe. So now we see that through doing mitzvahs, we see that the Gilui Lakus that comes from mitzvahs becomes a Gilui as part of the Teva of the Bria. Because in the Teva of the Bria, the Teva of the world, which is the Helam of the world, that's the Teva of the world, in it Gufe, there is this Gilui of its purpose. And das ist die Asbore von dem, was man sagt, dass the Gilui Laosid is totally the Maiseinu Vavi Deseinu calls my Meshach HaGolos. That's why the Alter Rebbe says that the real revelation, Losid Lovei, depends on our actions during Golos. Mitzad the Mesiras Nefesh and Bisman HaGolos, because of the Mesiras Nefesh, it's only there in Golos, which is, in Golos is the greatest Helam, but that greatest Helam expresses the Gilui Lakus, which is the purpose of the Golos. Wird in dem Helam von Elam Gufe aruz gebracht und is Gale, as ein Kavone is the Gilui Lakus HaNimshach al Teire Mitzvahs. So when you bring Gilui Lakus through Mesiras Nefesh in the time of Golos, you're bringing out the true Teva of the Helam. The true Teva of the Helam, because the Eibishter wants that the Helam should bring you to a greater Gilui. So when you have the Mesiras Nefesh through Helam, and when is that? That's only in Zman HaGolos. Then you see how the world, Be'etzem, the Teva of the world, is Gilui Lakus. Das is the Sibir of the Amshochas Lakus of the Mitzvahs is Zman HaGolos. That's why the Lakus that comes through Mitzvahs, asking time of Golos, is pale B'yeser says, that causes even more. Und is ich mehr mislabish in the Metzias von Gashmis Elam Gufe. And that is mislabish, is put into, that's part of the Teva of the Gashmias. He's at the Skumtaris losses love in the Gile, and losses love will be completely revealed. Losses love it'll be because of the characteristic and the Teva of the Basar. Because, and the Kashi as before, how could it be when the Teva is Helam? And even if we say that the Kavana is Gilui, that Kavana Guf is Behelam. So the nature is the Helam. How do we say the nature is the Gilui Lakus? So he said now, the fact that there is in Golos, there's a Kirch HaMesiras Nefesh, which is the highest level of Gilui that comes through Helam. So here we have a revelation in the Helam that the Helam feels that there's a purpose of Gilui. Well, B'meila, since the Helam feels purpose of Gilui, so the real Teva is the Teva of Gilui Lakusa. But Losid Love will be Gala, it'll be that the Teva of the Welt is like this. Apikola now that we verstehen im Chilul zwischen der Sheiches und Parashat Shmini zu Sima Sedre und Parashat Tzav Shel Ufaneo, the Sheiches and Parashat Zeis Achai to the Parashat Shmini Gufe. Now we'll go back to the beginning. We said in the beginning there are two connections. There's the connection, the beginning of Parashat Shmini to the end of Parashat Tzav. Parashat Tzav talks about the Shivas Miyam Eluyim. This is the 8th day. And then there's another connection between the beginning of the Sedre to the end of the Sedre. The beginning of the Sedre is Vayiva Yom HaShmini. The end is Zeis Achaya, which means the kosher and non-kosher animals. Now we'll understand. In the Zayin Yemei HaMeluyim, Parashat Tzav, in the 7 days of Meluyim, which is spoken about in the end of Parashat Tzav, we look and see there's a pshat like what's the chiluk between the 7 days of Meluyim to the 8th day. 7 days of Meluyim, the Shechina didn't really come down, but they brought korbanos, they did all kinds of avedas. But that it says is that they did to bring down a lakus as much as a human being down here is able to do. That's the called avedas shalamata. That's what we do. Eir die Amshocha von der lakus was wird nimmt durch Isarusa de la Tate, was wird nicht in B'china Zayin. Even the lakus that you mamshich through Isarusa de la Tate means through aveda down here. That's all part of the Zayin Yemei HaMeluyim. And it's great madregas, but it's all madregas of Ishtalshalis as much as a human being down here could reach. And that was Zayin Yemei HaMeluyim. But this is outgiven the Achone and Akdama zum Kvei Davaye. This was only a preparation and an introduction to the Kvei Davaye, to the Ashros Hashchina B'Mishkan B'Yem HaShmini HaMeluyim. It was only an introduction to the level of 8, which represents the highest madrega. And as he said in the beginning of the Sikha, 8 represents the highest level of Lamaila Mishtalshalis into Ishtalshalis, into Welt. But that wasn't in the 7 days. But this was an introduction to the 8th day. Adozal Zayin and an for Shmini. That the 8th day would be in a form of Shmini. What's Shmini? Das heißt, das Prince Lakus was is moved to Lagamra from the Bria. Lakus Shmini is the separation, complete separation higher than the Bria. So werden verbunden, ich mit Inyoni Abria, should be connected to the Inyonim of the Bria. So that's why he said in the beginning that the connection between the end of Mitzav to Parsha beginning of Shmini is a connection of an introduction. Sai Begashmi is Parsha that was 7 days in introduction to the 8, but the feeling Ruchni is the Abaita that they did Lamato is all Seder Shtalshel. It's all part of the Bria. That's an introduction. When you do as much as you can, that's an introduction to reach the higher level. So it's not part of the Shmini. The connection is as an introduction, just like the Gashmi is the 7th introduction to the 8. In der Parsha, but in the end of Parsha, where it talks about the non-kosher animals, and which you're not allowed to eat, and you become Tomei. That is, as much as it seems to be a complete different inyan, that is part of the concept of Shmini. It's all in the same seder of Shmini, with one name Shmini, which represents, as we said, the whole concept of L'mayla Mishtalshas into Ishtalshalas. That Nakuda is there in Shmini, and the Nakuda is also there in the end when it talks about the non-kosher animals. Why? The Zichel von Eilam Loshen Helam, and we have to purify the world. Eilam, which is Loshen Helam, concealment. When we work with the world to purify the world, to elevate the world, which is brings out the purpose of the creation of the world, is there should be Gilei Lakus. The purpose of creation is to bring down not just the light of Shtalshalis, to bring down the right of L'mayla Mishtalshalis. There is Zichut Tutzichu V'Vem was his Dodem Metzias and Sinnes Mokim Farhelem Yeser Chayis V'Hemes Meis. This concept of bring down the higher level of Lakus into Ishtalshalis in the whole form, the way you said before, that you have when you have the real Helam. As we said before, where is that? As we said before, where is that felt? In the real Helam. In the real Helam, like we said before, in Golas, then you see the Mesiras Nefesh. So Bechlal on the bell, when you have the Helam, that's the way to bring out the real Gilui. So having Chayas of Hemes Tmeis, non-kosher animals. Und von deswegen ist dort der Lahavdol in Atome, in Ator, in Achai, in Achel, in Achai, Shalisechel, that you have the non-kosher animal, and still you separate yourself from it. And you know this is kosher, this is not, this is tummy, this is not. That's what causes the Gilui of a Lakus. The real Helam brings the real Gilui Lakus, which is the nature of the world, as we said before. And I says, let's skip the brackets for a second. So when you have the non-kosher animals and you separate yourself from it, you know the difference in these. But durch dem wird der Zichuch eichen dem Helem, was geht an Nord zu Chayis V'Hemes Meis. So here you're purifying not the world, you're purifying the inyonim which are treif. I mean, you don't actually eat them, but by doing that and recognizing that's there, so that is a Helem. Non-kosher animals is a Helem. So working with that, the Zichuch of that, the zichuch of that, that's the zichuch that brings out the higher gilui. And with the Medrash okay from Posik Zeis Hapema, the bed and this Posik Zeis Hapema, that this you should eat, this not. Le nitno amitzah leYisrael letzar bet mesabris. The mitzvahs were given to the Yidden to purify them. Siruv domain zichuch, purification. So the real purification of the helem of the treif, of staying away from the treif when it's there in front of your eyes. So the Gemara says someone doesn't do an aveda, he gets schar like he does a mitzvah. He didn't do a mitzvah. So the Gemara says, if the Aveda came to you, someone offered you chazeh, and you don't eat it, that's like a mitzvah. But doing that is something more than doing other mitzvahs. Other mitzvahs you have nothing to do with klippah. Here you're dealing with klippah is there, and you purify it by not eating it. That's where the helem brings out the gilui. Like we said, the golas brings out the Mesiras Nefesh. This brings out the higher gilui, and this is a gilui which is higher than the Shtalshalas, but this is a Gila that's part of the nature of the world. Because the nature of the world is that the Helam should bring out the Gila. And let's go back to the bracket. Like the Chazal say, a person should not say, I don't want chazir. I don't like chazir. Don't say that. But you should say, I want chazir. I like chazir. What should Hashem said not needed. So what it means is the saying that I like it and I stay away from it. That's the greatest, that's a helav. Liking chazir is a helav, and nevertheless not to do it, that brings out the greatest gilui. And durch dem, was in dem helav, spiegelt so hob sein kavana betachlis. And since in this helam, there is a reflection of the tachlis, because the nature is that the helam brings a higher level of gilui. Like the golus, the nature of the golus is that it's such a helam that brings you the kerech hamesiras nefesh. So that reflects the tachlis of why the helam is there, which is that the helam is there for the gilui lekus. The rotzen natzvim von Ayidin. It brings out that this is the real rotzen of Ayid, like it says, Ovishe b'shemayim goes like the Eibishter was gezer. Was werd durch dem Nisgale, the Keich of Ayid et Nisgale. Like he said before, the Keich of Mesiras Nefesh, here he says the Keich that Ayid wants to listen to the Eibishter. That becomes Nisgale through the Helam. So the Helam, this Spiegel top reflects in the Helam, it's Tachlis. Those two of them, Gilui from Shmini, that brings the level of Shmini. So the end of the parsha, when it talks about things which are not kosher, that's connected to the Shmini. Shmini is the level, that's the higher level of Gilui, which is higher than the Shtalsha, but it should come down in the Shtalsha. That is revealed in the Welt, but the whole concept is it should be revealed in the Welt, not as a Dover Neis, as an addition to the Welt, but it should be part of the nature. Where do we see that as part of the nature is the fact that the Helam, the nature of Helam is that it brings to a higher Gila, it brings to Mesiras Nefesh. So this brings the Gila of Shmini, and the Gila Lakus was his Hecher in ganzen Welt, and the Gila Lakus is completely higher in the world. Vet Nisgala in Shiva, it becomes Nisgala in the 7. Esvet Shmini. Shmini means there is 7 and this is an 8. That means it's connected to the 7. Nisgala v'nisachet in the Bria Gufik and Al Barucha. That this Shmini is Nisgala and becomes one with the Bria, that the Bria, this becomes the nature of the 7 of the Bria. What the Medrash sagt, this explains, not in the Kudah. The Medrash says that the highest mayas he does when he showed them the different different animals, which are tomei, non-kosher, says, Meisher Roas HaMalchis v'Yisukon. Moshe Rabbeinu saw all the nations when they're involved. In other words, all the golos he saw. In there, the Medrash explains in detail what the problems were with each golos. So what does it got to do with this? What's it got to do with golos here? From der Uftu, Gilui, from Zeisachaya, Lahavdil, is the Rinya Vestutzukov Golias. This Nakuda that we accomplished by having a non-kosher animal and and getting to the higher Madrege, that is the same accomplished as Golas. But the Amshochas from them, and the Amshocha will be the 8. It'll be Nimshach from such a high level into the 7 into Vil. It says in Medrash, one of the animals that's not kosher is the Chazir. Hazu Edin. Loma Nikra Shmo Chazir. Says, why is it called Chazir? Why is Edin called a Chazir? Shemachzeres Atero Lebailo. That the Edin will bring back the crown to its original own meaning. Although the Ksiv, like it says, V'olo Mishim B'Hartzion Lishpedes Hareisov, that Mashiach will come. They'll come to Hartzion to judge Hareisov. V'hoisel Hashem Amlucha. And this will bring the Lucha will be to Hashem, but it will be the bitter of the revelation of the purification of Edin. So he says, this all fits with what he's saying, that the whole kavana is of the golas is to come to the higher level of Gila. That's what the Medrash says here. Edom is called because it brings back the Gila Lakus, because the tachlis of the helam of Edom, which is a very low helam, is to come to the Gila, to B'hoyas Hashem Amlucha, and that should be not mitzad, the Gila Lakus is so strong, it'll push away the helam of the world. No. The world itself will be nisgala, that its nature, its tachlis is the tachlis of Gila Lakus. It's a hard sikh.
The Helen won't be there anymore.
It won't be a Helam.
No,
There won't be a Helam B'Peil. That could be even if the Peil, the nature is Helam, but they will push away the Helam. That's a different thing. That's not that's still there is still Helam, but the Helam is the Gila of Lakus is stronger than the Helam. There will be no concept of Helam because the Helam itself will be the Helam of the world is part of the Gila of Lakus. Because that brings the Mesilas Nefesh now, and that'll be Nizgalus then.
Shkoyach.
Thank you, Rabbi Shapiro. It's great.
You're welcome.
Big long one.
Yes. Maybe we don't even understand it fully, but
Right.
the Kochazach in this scene I'm talking about is worth the while.
The Neshama versteht.
Okay, go over it again.
A bit of a state of Gufeche. Maybe not alle Protein, but a bit of a statement. Okay. Seid gesund. Gute Nacht.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.